Who knows what sort of weekend it will be? Yes, it's going to be election weekend for 2 states. That's what we'll be talking about now as we head to Makwe in Abuja.
Thank you, Chamberlain. We are going to be hoping that there will be violence-free weekends, regardless of whatever happens there. We have with us this morning, as you already saw in the opening montage there, Samson Itodo, Head Youth Initiative for Advocacy, Growth and Advancement. That's YAGA. Welcome to Sunrise Daily.
Thank you. Good morning.
And we also have with us Chris Nwokobia, who's convener Country First Movement. You're also welcome to Sunrise Daily. And of course, we're talking about the preparations for Kogi and Bayelsa elections by both INEC and security agencies. But before we talk about preparations, let's talk about the issues. So far, gentlemen, watching the press, watching television or looking at the papers or looking at social media where we understand a lot of the campaigns are going on. Have you listened? Have you been able to decipher what the issues are for the people of Kogi and Bayelsa as they go into those polls? Let's start with you, Chris.
Well, I think it's been more of hate, attrition, partisanship than of issues. I've been following the campaigns, I've been following the rallies, and perhaps that's why there's so much apprehension. Perhaps that's why the IG is speaking up, that's why the army is speaking, that's why the parties are being called to a no-violence pact signing ceremony. Rather than making the people the summum bonum, rather than making society and good governance the issues, we are seeing people with this 4x4 sign, and then we're seeing people who are making accusations as to thugs being armed. And I think that the time has come for us to begin to nudge the political operators to making issues the reason for political contest and contestations, if you like. Because as you and I talk, what bothers me deeply and bothers the carapace of my mind is what legacy we're leaving for posterity. Since 1999, we had thought that every election will get us closer to the promise, which is simply a more refined democratic process, a more refined democratic protocol, a more refined electioneering process. But unfortunately, it does appear like every election brings us closer to doomsday. Every election brings us closer to Armageddon. Every election brings us closer to Golgotha. And that's what INEC, the political operators, the political parties must begin to agitate. We must grapple with the issues. Why do we have this winner-takes-it-all sentiments and tendencies? Why is politics more about the political operators than about the people, about the hoi polloi? Why do we threaten each other? I remember that's actually what will bring me back to the immediate past president's very apt quotation. It's a quotable quote, that his ambition shouldn't be worth the life, the blood of any citizen. I did actually think that our political operators will take that to the next level. But unfortunately, you see them threatening the space from the soapbox. You see them, rather than addressing fundamental issues, what they will do with the meager resources in the states, what they will do with youth unemployment, restiveness, what they will do with hunger and poverty. You hear them sounding like czars and people who want to pretend over conquered people. And I think that the time has come for us to begin to address these fundamentals. We must do a value overhaul, and we must ask politicians to become responsible and responsive to the people rather than about egocentricity and power, the lust for power.
Samson, is it too late in the day to bring the focus back to the issues? I mean, if you agree that we're not seeing a lot of the issues that should inform decisions made by the electorate being discussed?
I don't think it's late. The parties are allowed to campaign until 24 hours before the election. So it's not too late. But the question is whether the key actors are interested in this conversation about what issues they stand for or why they're actually running for office. And if you go back to the whole candidate selection process from the party primaries, what were the parameters that were used by the parties to determine which candidate will fly the party's flag in this election? And you can see from both, from all the parties, to be frank, that the discourse wasn't about the implementation of a party manifesto that one changes the poverty credentials of the states, or that looks at how to address infrastructural deficits in these states, or even improve the economy of this state, and more importantly, the security, because these states historically have been plagued with security challenges. And that was not the discourse. We're going into an election that will be determined by the highest bidder. And this started from the party primaries. And you clearly see that most of the parties didn't have democratic primaries. The candidate selection process were very, very toxic and hostile. And that is why for these elections, we have over 20 pre-election cases just around the conduct of the party primaries. And you could see how the court also has been issuing judgments. In fact, tomorrow and next tomorrow, we are also expecting rulings on several issues, both in Bayelsa and Kogi. And this may in itself impact on what transpires in the election on Saturday. So it's not too late. The voters have a critical role to play. And the concern for voters is about, do we have a secured environment to exercise our franchise? Now, that's their major concern at the moment, because the whole climate has been tensed. You can see the pre-election violence. Yesterday, we released our third pre-election observation report from Yaga Africa, because we deployed long-term observers to the 21 local governments in Kogi, as well as the 8 local governments in Bayelsa. And the trends from our first, second, and third report clearly shows that there's been pre-election violence, intimidation of voters. There's been recruitment of thugs, and we released the locations where these thugs have been recruited. There's also armed stockpiling. And you can see just in Bayelsa, there have been reports of gunshots, disruption of campaigns. In Kogi, some parties are prevented from accessing certain locations to cast their vote, to campaigns for the election. And that itself has heated the polity. Just yesterday, one of the political parties' secretariat was raised in the state capital, where you have where you have the presence of most of the security agencies. And so for voters is, please, can this election just come and go? Because it's disrupting a lot of economic activities as well as security. And so it becomes very difficult for them to put issues on the front burner.
So somehow you've managed to tie the two. I mean, in terms of the preparation so far, you've raised a major concern, which is about security for a lot of the voters, because it would seem right now that people are not really concerned about the polls. If the attitude is let the elections just come and go so we can have our lives back, it might mean that a lot of the electorate might not really be concerned about the polls. And that should worry people who are, talking about democracy. Because democracy is supposed to be about the choice of the people. Yeah. Is there a way which we can get this conversation back to that? Because I know that if you talk to the actors involved, listen to INEC at its stakeholders meeting in Kogi State, the concern of the PDP candidate was about armed stockpiling, which you've also raised here. The governor, the incumbent, who is also running in the race, says it's not as bad as people painted. That this fear of violence is not as bad as the media. I think those were his words. It's painting it. Is it a little exaggerated in your opinion?
Mokwe, let me say this, that I have seen pictures, I've seen videos regarding the open display of thugs, in Kogi. I saw some in Bayelsa, where people are actually saying to you that it's either win or we mow down the opposition. Whatever happens, we must win. And I think that the big problem we have on our hands is the mentality of our political operators. I say this advisedly. When you hear politicians speak, and tragically we have just about one industry, permit me use the word, that is moving in this country today, and that's the political industry. So people come in with so much money and they invest for gain. It is really not about the people. If the norms and the normative were different, then we can begin to hazard more positive guesses. But unfortunately, what we have on our hands are political operators whose minds are made up. I think that now is the right time to begin to start a new value orientation. And I think that it must start from the top. When in 2014-2015, new mantras came on our political amphitheater, things like haters, wailers, and all that, we knew things were going to degenerate. Because if I don't like you politically, if I don't like your manifesto, if I don't buy into what you're preaching, it doesn't mean I hate you. But when we use such strong words, then we have a problem on our hands. And that's actually what is manifesting. There's this popular, the witch cried last night, and the child dies this morning. Now, unfortunately, we have a major situation on our hands. Like Sam said, if you go to Kogi, you see people brandishing arms on the streets. If you go to Bayelsa, you see people brandishing, and then you see accusations and counter-accusations. And the police has a lot on his hands. That's why they're speaking up. The army is saying, don't call us into any, just make your people behave because we're not going to condone any act of violence.
So let me quickly ask Sam's opinion on that, because we know that in the last elections, the army came under severe criticism for its role in some of the states of the Federation. And perhaps, there's also been a general call for the military to be less involved in our democratic process. What is your take now that the military is saying, look, we don't want to touch this? Even with a long pole, we think that the electorate should, or the people there should behave, and the police is the lead agency.
That's a bit problematic. It's problematic because, one, we need to keep at the back of our minds that elections take place within a context. And we got a context where we're already grappling with security challenges, and the military is deployed across over 30-something states, and they're there. So if we're going to be conducting elections, we're not conducting elections out of this context. Therefore, the military cannot stay aloof and say she's not interested in actually what happens on Saturday or in the build-up to Saturday, in view of the fact that, one, are there security threats? It is established, there's evidence to show that there's security threats. Is the police capable to neutralize these threats or address this issue in the build-up to the election? My response is no. And we need that collaboration. Why don't you have
that confidence in the police?
It's not like I don't have the confidence in the police. It's about history. If you look at the presidential elections, how many police officers do we have today? We have over 300 and something thousand police officers. About 30-something thousand will be deployed to Kogi. Kogi has about 2,000 plus 2,600 polling units or so. And if you have 4 police officers per polling unit, you discover that the territories would need to be secured. And the police officers who are deployed on election duty at the polling stations are not expected to carry arms. Even though you've got other security agencies collaborating with the police to man these elections, but we are dealing with a very special situation. Kogi and Bayelsa are a special
I'm
case.
wondering if there's really, sorry to interrupt you, I'm wondering if there's actually sincerity to tackle the security, issues. If we already know, I mean, if you talked about stockpiling of arms, you talked about thugs recruitment, shouldn't things like that be, I don't think, exactly, it's not intelligence that, if you have it as an intelligence, it should not be intelligence that's difficult to get for the security agencies, if indeed there is the will to actually ensure that there is law and order on the day that elections are conducted.
You and I know the role that security agencies play during elections. The Osun governorship elections before the 2019 election was a case in point. You also saw what happened in the general elections, that security agencies oftentimes are used to undermine the process. Because if there's no security for INEC to deploy election materials and deploy its personnel, it becomes very, very difficult. And oftentimes the politicians actually, instrumentalize the security agencies to undermine the elections in the strongholds of their opponents. And so the major concern is, I agree with you, the sincerity of purpose, but we know that even the Electoral Act has clearly spelled out the role of our security agencies, particularly the military. The fundamental challenge for us to this election is who is going to call the shot with respect to election security management. If INEC is unable to deploy, or you've got thugs. Look at what happened in Lagos in general elections, where thugs moved from polling units to polling units, disrupting elections. The police were there, but they couldn't even do
Is it that they couldn't or they refused to? I mean, there are two issues.
In some cases, they couldn't. In some cases, of course, we know that in some cases we've got our security agencies who are already compromised because the politicians actually use them to undermine the process.
So
and that's a challenge for us.
What then is going to be the fate of INEC? Because if the environment is such that, there are concerns about security, INEC, of course, will be concerned about its own personnel as well. Can we really then task INEC with the task of conducting free, fair, and credible elections?
Mokwe, I will completely align with the motive, the intent, how committed the operators, the security agencies, and those who run this enterprise to ensuring that there is security during elections. And I do want to say that the time has come for our political operators to understand that not only is a highly progressive world watching us, posterity and indeed our children are watching what we do with politics and electioneering processes. Because the truth is, arms are not spirits. Arms pass through certain, So if the security agencies want to nip this at the bud, they will. The unfortunate thing is that the two leading parties are the core of our problem as a nation, a la the electoral processes and the democratic. I say this advisedly. If the PDP and the APC were to see politics and democracy as simply for the good of the country and indeed the people, then they will raise the bar. Unfortunately, you hear people who are leaders at that level say it must be our victory. And the other side saying, we will not allow it. It must be our victory, or hell will be let loose. And such mannerism, such temperament, such tendencies are not good for the democratic process.
Very true. The question is, can we then expect, what expectation can we then put on INEC?
For INEC?
Yes.
I see INEC as that child without a father and a mother who's asked to perform a noble task. I see INEC as that child begging for support. Because whether you like it or not, from the appointing protocol of the INEC chairman, he has a problem. He who pays the piper, they say, calls the tune. He has that challenge. And then on the other side, where INEC does not control the security agencies, it has another challenge. And then where it does not have the ability to enforce certain protocols, like what we saw during the February and March elections, where even INEC ad hoc staffs had to be seized at some point in Akwa Ibom and several other places. You ask yourself where we're headed. And I think that that's why, going forward, we must begin to think about a holistic overhaul of our electioneering process. The time to begin to look strongly at electronic voting is now. The time to look at how our law allows that and how we protect both the front end and the back end. Because even in Ghana here,
Samson doesn't seem to agree with you. But
the time to do all that
you don't agree
now.
with electronic voting?
No, I don't, for very obvious reasons. And I want us to be very careful, because we've got about 1,100 and something days to the elections, to the 2023 elections. We just need to prioritize what are the core issues that needs for reform as we march towards 2023, because we're actually out of time.
I have to say voting, we are out of time on this segment as well, gentlemen. Well, whatever happens, we sincerely hope that there will be no violence, and that we'll be pleasantly surprised that all of this, talk about violence, during the elections will be something that was speculative. We're hoping, that everybody would have been wrong about the apprehension which they were feeling towards those polls. And it's not just about wishing, it's about work as well. Security agencies and INEC has a lot of work, or have a lot of work on their hands. Well, we wish them well. I have to thank you, gentlemen, for coming on. Samson Itodo is Head Youth Initiative.
It's Yaga Africa, not Youth Initiative.
Beg your pardon.
Yeah.
Yaga Africa just does it. Summarizes it. If you want to know what it is, go online. Chris Walker-Bia is convener, Country First Movement. Thank you, gentlemen, for coming on.
Always a pleasure.
Fun pleasure.
Summary continues in a moment. Your tweets and comments. Please stay with us.
All right, let's take a look at some comments coming from you about some of the matters that we have spoken about today. The first of which happens to be about the forthcoming Kogi and Bayelsa elections. Now, this tweet is coming through from Honor Akbe, who says, well, according to Honor, Bayelsa Guba, sporadic gunfire since last night by mobile policemen around police headquarters in Yenagoa. What are they trying to do? Scare the voters from voting on Saturday? With a big question marks.
All right, this one is from Edwin Hakwero. Says, social media bill. This government came to be massively via social media. Why clamp down on social media? If social media is all about fake news, like the Minister of Information wants us to believe, does it mean the government came in via fake news? Leave our social media alone, please.
Well, Otumba Agbola is writing this one. He says, let them focus on the electoral reforms bill first. There are more important bills. That's in reference to the social media bill.
And then Shield says, the social media bill is somehow a good one, especially when it's not targeted to silence the media. It should be a 50-50 thing on the part of both government and the masses. As much as government detests and hates speech, we also expect selfless leadership.
Then this one, lastly, from Zemo, says, is there really any need for a bill to regulate the social media when there are provisions in the existing laws to handle that? You can be charged for defamation if you post any fake news. By implication, this is just a replication of the laws. As from Zemo.
Okay, so there you go. Your comments. Just keep them coming through. We'd like to hear from you what you think, as long as there's no hate speech. Well, that's the show today. Thank you for watching. We'll see you next time. I'm Chamberlain Uso.
I am Ayo Makine. Have a beautiful day.
You see, he said next time, not tomorrow, because he's going away. Well, we'll see you tomorrow. Thank you for watching. I'm Well, good, Yusuf.
Good to be sharp on pay attention.